Welcome back to Silent Stories Updates, where true life meets unexpected revenge, justice, and lessons that hit straight to the heart. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned till the end because today's story will leave you speechless. This is the story of a quiet man who had enough of being bullied, a woman who thought she could get away with cruelty, and the steel mailbox that changed everything. Let's begin. I woke up one morning to the sound of metal scraping against gravel. It wasn't an unfamiliar sound, it was one I had come to dread. When I stepped outside, my worst suspicion was confirmed. My mailbox had been destroyed again. Wood splinters littered the grass, the metal door was bent in half, and my letters were scattered down the road like confetti. I stood there in disbelief, staring at the mess. It wasn't the first time. In fact, it was the fourth time this month. At first, I thought it was some random act of vandalism. Maybe teenagers, bored out of their minds, taking their anger out on anything they could find. But after it kept happening every single week, same day, same time, I knew it wasn't random. Someone was doing this deliberately. My name is David. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. It's the kind of place where people care about their lawns, wave at passing cars, and gossip about who's painting their house next. I'd lived there 4 years with my wife, until she passed away 3 years ago. Since then, I mostly kept to myself. I wasn't rude, just quiet. I fixed things, kept the house clean, and minded my own business. Maybe that's why nobody really noticed what was happening. But after the fourth smashed mailbox, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood there in the early morning light, staring at the broken post and the destroyed box, my heart pounding with anger. Whoever was doing this thought I'd stay quiet forever. They were wrong. I started paying attention to everything around me. Tire tracks, footprints, even strange noises at night. Then, one Saturday evening, I sat on the porch longer than usual. Around midnight, I heard an engine, faint at first, then growing louder. A silver SUV came speeding down the street. My pulse quickened. The car swerved slightly as it approached my driveway. Then I heard the now familiar crash. I ran to the end of the driveway just in time to see the taillights disappearing into the distance. That was it. I finally had a clue. The next morning, I started asking my neighbors if they'd seen anything. Some hadn't, but one person had. Mrs. Green, the elderly lady who lived 2 houses down. She leaned over her fence and said softly, "David, I think that might be Valerie." Valerie. The name rang a bell. She had moved into the neighborhood about 6 months earlier. She was the kind of neighbor everyone tried to avoid. Loud arguments, yelling at her kids, shouting at her boyfriend, and blasting music late at night. She'd already made enemies on the block, parking in front of other people's driveways, ignoring HOA notices, leaving her trash bins out for days. But why me? Then I remembered something. A few weeks before all this started, I had called animal control about a dog that had been left outside in the summer heat for hours. I didn't even know whose dog it was at the time, I just knew it was suffering. Turns out, it was hers. From that moment, everything made sense. The smashed mailboxes weren't random. They were revenge. The anger I felt that day wasn't just about property damage, it was about being targeted for doing the right thing. I had spent years avoiding conflict, but this time, I wasn't going to just rebuild another fragile wooden mailbox. I was going to make a statement. I spent the next few days in my garage, gathering materials. Steel sheets, bolts, rebar, concrete. I welded, measured, and drilled until I built what I could only describe as the fortress of mailboxes. It looked normal on the outside, painted white with a red flag, but beneath that surface, it was all solid steel. It weighed over 100 pounds and was anchored 3 feet into a concrete base. I wasn't just fixing a mailbox. I was making a point. When I finished, I stood there, sweat dripping from my forehead, staring at what I had created. It was beautiful in its own way, silent, strong, unbreakable. And then I waited. A week passed. Nothing happened. Then too, I began to think maybe she'd given up. Maybe she'd realized I wasn't worth the trouble. But on the third Saturday night, just before midnight, I heard it again. The low rumble of a car engine. I turned off the porch light and stood by the window. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw the silver SUV creeping down the street. It slowed in front of my house, headlights cutting across the lawn. I could almost see her smirk behind the wheel. She revved the engine and swerved. Then came the sound. A thunderous crash echoed through the night, followed by a sickening crunch of metal and plastic. My steel mailbox didn't move an inch, but her SUV, well, that was another story. The front bumper had crumpled like paper. The airbags had deployed, and the car sat there, smoking, nose deep in the ditch. I grabbed my phone and ran outside. The driver's door flew open, and out stumbled Valerie. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, and she was furious. "You set me up," she screamed, pointing at me. "You did this on purpose?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You've been smashing my mailbox every week for a month, Valerie. I just built one that fights back." By then, neighbors had started coming out, drawn by the noise. Flashlights flickered from porches, and a few people whispered her name. She tried to spin the story, shouting about how my mailbox was dangerous, how I built a trap. But the truth was right there in front of everyone. Within minutes, the police arrived. Valerie's story fell apart as soon as they took one look at the scene. They measured skid marks, inspected the mailbox, and asked her a few questions. She tried to act like the victim, but her damaged SUV told another story. When one of the officers came to me and asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated. For a long moment, I just looked at her standing there, humiliated and furious, trying to hold together what little pride she had left. I thought about all the times I had fixed what she'd broken, the quiet anger, the frustration, the hopelessness. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need revenge anymore. She had already lost. I told the officer I just wanted her to pay for the damage and move on. And that's what happened. Valerie was charged with reckless driving and had to pay restitution. Not long after, she sold her house and moved away. The neighborhood got quiet again, peaceful. Every morning, I'd walk to the end of the driveway to get my mail, and there it was, my steel mailbox, still standing strong. Not a single scratch. It became more than just a box for letters. It was a reminder that sometimes you don't have to shout to make your point. You just have to stand your ground and stay unbreakable. Neighbors would often stop by and laugh about it. "That mailbox has got more backbone than half the folks in town," one of them joked. And maybe they were right, because what started as an act of revenge turned into something deeper. For years, after losing my wife, I had felt small, like life had taken everything that made me strong. But building that mailbox reminded me who I was. Someone who builds. Someone who stands firm. Someone who doesn't back down when pushed. It wasn't about the mailbox anymore. It was about rebuilding myself. Looking back now, I realize that people like Valerie exist everywhere. People who think they can tear others down because they're angry, bitter, or lonely. But when you refuse to break, when you refuse to let them change who you are, that's when you win. Some battles aren't fought with fists or anger. They're fought with patience, persistence, and a quiet kind of strength. Every time I walk past that mailbox, I smile. Not because I beat her, but because I found peace in standing my ground. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons. Sometimes it's through loss. Sometimes it's through pain. And sometimes it's through a steel mailbox that refuses to fall. So, if you're out there dealing with someone who keeps trying to knock you down, remember this. You don't have to fight fire with fire. You just have to make sure your foundation is stronger than their blows. Because strength isn't about how hard you hit back, it's about how well you endure, rebuild, and rise again. And as for me, every letter I pull out of that mailbox feels like a small victory. A reminder that sometimes standing quietly, unshakably firm, is the loudest message you can send. Thank you for listening to Silent Stories Updates. If you felt inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, keep standing strong. Because sometimes the quietest people have the toughest steel inside. Stay tuned for more stories that remind us all what resilience truly means.